Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast. And welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Every now and then, someone sees or runs across a large, vicious, horrid humanoid creature roaming the Sierra Nevadas. Said to be female, thin and 7 feet tall, with long arms and long legs, a deformed face and long dirty light-colored hair, this bestial creature is known as Penelope, and she is the subject of urban legend in the area. Park rangers in the area have documented a few strange sightings over the years in the Sierra Nevada mountains, and these encounters have been attributed to this creature, who for some unknown reason is referred to as Penelope. She has been described as wearing no clothes, looking like a bestial giant witch. Rumored to be lightning fast, with razor-sharp claws, she has supposedly disemboweled or decapitated her victims before they even realize she is there, moving so fast they have no time to react before she is upon them. Who is she? Where did she come from? No one is sure, but the short version of the urban legend describes her as a woman who became lost in the Sierra Nevada mountains and somehow turned into the flesh-eating monster that terrorizes the region today. Campfire tales in the area have, of course, elaborated on the legend. If you piece together the story, Penelope and her husband one winter, while driving through the Sierras, were hit by a brutal snowstorm, which caused their car to get swept from the road down a cliffside. Penelope awoke from the crash to discover her husband's head laying in her lap. Her sanity suffering from this, Penelope fled the car, into the woods, and became lost in the wilderness. She somehow was able to wander the woods, surviving on berries, insects, and eventually raw birds and small animals, but was unable to find her way out to civilization. And here's where the story goes even weirder. As another storm hit, Penelope, searching for shelter, discovered several dumped large metal drums, toxic waste having seeped from them into the ground and area. She huddled inside one for protection from the storm, and passed out from her ordeal, sleeping in remnants of toxic waste which seeped into her. Penelope emerged from her sleep, crawling from the metal drum, a bestial, savage, giant monster with a never-ending urge to eat meat. Now equipped with fangs, claws, and a tangled mess of hair, she began her journey through the Sierra Nevadas looking for prey. Her sanity now long gone, supposedly she went on a murder spree throughout the area. If you believe the stories, she is responsible for derailing a train and eating its passengers, killing unsuspecting hikers, attacking campers, murdering park rangers, and even attacking a mobile home park where she turned over structures and made off with some of the people who lived there. The last part of this campfire tale has the FBI brought in to handle the issue, and hiring a posse of bounty hunters to chase after Penelope, eventually cornering her in the canyon. Penelope was shot several times, but managed to kill several of her pursuers, before finally climbing over a cliff and disappearing over top. And there we have it. A story formed of urban legend and campfire tales. A giant vicious killing machine that stalks the wilderness of the Sierra Nevada mountains. Is it true? Is there really a poor woman named Penelope who turned into a giant cannibal as a result of toxic waste dumped in the woods? Probably not, but still, every now and then, there is a sighting of something horrid, something giant, female, and scary. Although details are sparse and sightings rare, with one being as recent as 2012, park rangers are supposedly aware of her existence, and for whatever reason, have dubbed it Penelope.
My family and friends were up in the Sierras outside of Yosemite when 2 pale crawler humanoids approached us around midnight. There were 5 tents with people inside. My son was with me. I yelled out for everyone to start praying. The moment these 2 pale crawler humanoids started their banshee blather at top volume. They never got closer than 50 feet and usually only stuck around 3 nights in a row for about half an hour. No problems otherwise. Also, we talked about it over coffee the next morning. None of us ever felt any fear and stayed calm and relaxed. And we all knew exactly what these things did in 2015. He gives you the confidence you need, and it's no sweat at all with these creatures. You have power over them with the blood of the Lamb.
It is my hope to find those who have had a similar experience, especially in the region of the Sierra Nevada mountains, on the border of California and Nevada. I'm in the world of broadcasting. My eyes are my greatest tool for accuracy and detail. I am an accomplished visual artist and have studied the movement of animals closely since I was very young. I also have been coming to the same camping area for over 40 years, so scouting fish and other wildlife in the wilderness is second nature to me. That is to say, I have exceptional eyesight, and I feel I am a better witness to an event than most others. Not only because of my keen eyesight, but I also have the ability to keep my calm under extraordinary situations. Having said that, in this instance I have a fellow eyewitness. My wife of 13 years is the most skeptical of people that I know. She would never have believed my story if she wasn't there in the passenger seat beside me that night. I do not know how to categorize the creature I saw that night. What I saw was very humanoid, and that's what is so disturbing. The location was Bridgeport, California, at the Twin Lakes Resort. This is a remote fishing lodge high in the Sierra Nevada mountain range. The resort sits in a valley at about 7,000 feet and in the shadow of the mighty Sawtooth Ridge. A beautiful secluded spot with no cell phone service and tons of wildlife. The date would have been just after Labor Day 2014 at approximately 5:30 a.m. We had just finished loading the fishing gear and were headed to the creek for some daybreak fishing. The creek campground is about a quarter mile from the lake cabin. I have taken this short trip literally 100 times before, and it is always active with nocturnal wildlife, so we are always on high alert for the regulars like mule deer, black bear, jackrabbit, and even rattlesnakes on occasion. This morning was a little foggy and still very dark. The high mountain ridges keep the valley dark from dusk till dawn. I had just passed the small trailer campground as we saw something crossing the road coming in our direction, maybe less than 50 yards away. It looked very light and very close to the ground. It was the size of a large goat, but it moved very oddly. I thought goat because quickly I remembered there were sheep herders on the side of the mountain, but I hadn't seen them for maybe 30 years. I needed a second to figure out exactly what I was seeing, so I asked my wife in the front passenger seat, "What is that?" pointing at a thing running in our direction that the likes of which I know I had never seen before. I was mostly confused because its limbs were not bending or moving in the right way that a deer, bear, rabbit, or cats were supposed to move. My wife could only say slowly because of disbelief,
"What the hell?"
Now when my lights came across the creature, it was crossing the road, and we got the feeling we were totally surprised by it. As I turned on my high beams, it seemed to get very irritated as it turned its long human-like neck towards us and almost shook its head as it gave us a glare and started to double time along the road now in our direction. We were getting closer, but instead of being able to more positively ID the creature, I was only more confused with, mostly because this thing's legs weren't broken at all, it was running on them like that. Long lean limbs, but it was crawling, creeping impossibly low to the ground. Its torso is no more than 5 inches from the ground, yet it was moving at a strangely incredible pace. I wondered first, with such long limbs, why was it so low? And not running on the bottom of hooves or paws? How could it run so fast? The order of the feet landing was completely wrong too, and if it was really trying to retreat quickly, it was not bounding or bouncing or swaying side to side. Its limbs moved in unison like a crab or spider. It appeared to me to be a puppet being moved by a marionette, very bizarre. Maybe because I was so puzzled and troubled that I could not classify this animal. It kept me from flipping out when we got close enough to see the facial features. I should describe the features that I saw clearly and up close. As mentioned, a human-like torso about 4 feet long, no tail, human-like haunches. As we passed it, I saw it was not shaved at all, it was hairless and had pale skin. Its limbs were long, thin, very defined muscle and sinewy. Although it was crawling close to the ground, it had large, very human ape shoulders. I've only seen such shoulders on upright walking animals. It seemed to be running on its front knuckles or claws. Imagine a sloth but foot-long fingers or claws. The neck was thin and long, holding a forward-gazing predator head. The skull had features closer to a human ape than any canine, cat, rodent, or cervidee. The skull seemed to have a heavy protruding eye ridge, with a flat curve leading to the nasal opening. Then even stranger, the mouth. There was no long snout. This was a tight-lipped human mouth with a large chin that almost seemed to grin. But somehow I knew that it was not a friendly grin, almost evil. But how would an animal have an evil grin, right? If that wasn't enough to freak us out, then came the eyes. So at first sight my headlight lit this weird thing up, and as with all nocturnal animals, the first noticeable thing is always the reflection of its eyes in the car lights. Like all the rest of the many animals I had seen on this tiny stretch of road, their cover was blown instantly. Well, not the case this time, and of all the troubling things I had observed, this probably is the most unexplainable. I was driving right into it, and I could see the eyebrow ridge. I saw deep eye sockets, but no shiny large or tiny eyes, just the sockets. As I was sure to peer deep into whatever animal it was, eyes as we came within 15 feet of it. Well, when the moment of truth came, my wife and I were horrified when all we saw were deep red sockets. Like the thing had no eyes, or there was a red membrane over them. Well, I just about drove off the road and tried to track the thing, but something told me I was better off just watching it run in a cloud of dust into the chaparral. The frigging thing turned its head to look at us, was grinning all with just red eye sockets, and it just zips away, never breaking its creepy crawl. So that's my sighting. I never heard of or saw this thing again. And I have no idea what it could have been. Nothing adds up. I really feel I was not supposed to see this thing. People like to say maybe it was an experiment gone wrong or a mutated deformed animal, but what I have to say is that this thing wasn't sick or dying. It was strong, aware, fast, and would kick the ass of whatever would mess with it. So if this were a real cryptid, someone else must have seen it since this was a campsite. What would it be doing so close to humans if it depended on seclusion for survival? Doesn't add up.
I have been searching for months to find answers to what my wife and I saw near Labor Day 2014 while camping in the eastern Sierras in the Mono Village area. Most websites are just so outlandish and full of people that want to believe in monsters or UFOs. It just became frustrating that any hope of putting together the puzzle and maybe learning something from these rare experiences would be lost. I read the reported sighting of the man and his son seeing a tall, skinny, witch-looking thing outside his RV in the same region. Also, I was very interested in an article that discussed the Bigfoot problem and how people might be seeing ghosts of animals from the past. This is why it's so hard to gather evidence on. Maybe they materialize and dematerialize and we are just lucky to be present. This seems like a legitimate explanation to me because the creature I saw running by the road, if living, breathing and hunting in our physical world, would send all the people that live in Mono County back to the city once reports came of its appearance. I have been coming to the same area to camp and fish for over 30 years. Hell, it's 40 years to be exact. The Twin Lakes Resort in Bridgeport, California, right on the California-Nevada border, about an hour north of Mono Lake. High elevation, tons of wildlife and great fishing. One-way road up to the Twins ending at the base of the huge mountain range, north side of Yosemite. My parents brought me when I was 5 and now I bring them and my family every year, so I am very familiar with the wildlife. On many occasions I had up-close experiences with many of its inhabitants. For instance, one time a bear was spooked and backed up into my tent, sending me flying over the other two in my tent. I've seen some stuff. My family loves to fish, mostly catch and release. My favorite pastime is hiking and bird/animal watching. I have developed a keen eye for locating and identifying all types of wildlife. To give you an example of what I have personally seen in this valley: mountain lion, Sierra moose, bald eagle, golden eagle nesting, mountain goats, osprey, king snake, the list goes on. The point I'm trying to make is I've seen every kind of animal in this wilderness and I have a great knowledge of every other species of animal all over the world. Nature and wildlife have been a lifelong interest of mine and been the subject of much of my art since a child. Knowing the body parts and how they move together has been essential to understand as an artist. Okay, now to the sighting. My wife, stepson and myself were headed to the creek for some daybreak fishing. We left before dawn to get the car parked and walked to the creek. The time must have been close to 5:30 a.m. and it was still very dark and a slight fog. This trip, which is about a quarter mile from cabin to creek, is always full of nocturnal animals headed home after raiding the local campgrounds. So mule deer, black bear and huge jackrabbits crossing the road is no surprise. Like I have done 100 times before, keep an eye out, slow down, hit the high beams to illuminate the beasts with eyes reflecting my car lights. This time my lights caught something crossing the road that did not have reflective nocturnal eyes, so I slowed down immediately to about 20 miles per hour and tried my best to identify what it was. I was having trouble doing so since the thing was moving very low to the ground. Its belly is just inches from touching the ground. It appeared very pale or white, so I think goat or sheep. I immediately remembered decades ago there had been sheep herders on the side of the hill, but they had been gone for many years. Well, when my high beams hit this thing, it turned its long neck and glared at us and almost shook its head as if we pissed it off and didn't want to be seen at all. At first sight it was crossing the street almost diagonally, headed our way, then along the side of the road in our direction. Now my wife had seen it from the start, but I needed extra time so that I could ID it and give her an explanation of what type of animal it was, like I always do. I asked her, "What is that?" I just wanted to make sure she was seeing and observing the same thing I was. Now the first odd thing that I couldn't understand, besides the way it was crawling so low to the ground. Unlike a hunting cat, the legs were all wrong. Its knees seemed to be backwards, but it was running on them. My thought was that it was an escaped sheep or goat that had broken knees and it was running for its life because it was moving fast. As it came closer and closer towards us, I could hardly take my eyes off its freaky legs. I still lay awake at night, puzzled by how they were working. I've not seen any mammal move this way. The closest thing would be a crab or insect. The front and back legs moved together in unison. There was no bouncing, swaying, galloping, or jumping like that of a mammal. This creature's torso, which was about 4 feet long, stayed straight, low to the ground as its legs/arms did all the work. To me it looked like a puppet with a marionette moving it along. So unreal, like one of H.R. Geiger's alien creature is shown climbing around super fast with only its arms/legs moving. By this time my wife could only get out what the hell as we saw it from maybe 50 yards away to about 20 yards. You could see that it had no fur at all. Just pale, sinewy stretched skin over long, skinny well-defined limbs. Its broken knees were long skinny fingers or claws, a foot long or more. The torso was maybe the size of a large goat, but it also had broad shoulders, very human. Possibly like this thing normally walks upright. This is what my wife kept pointing out. The shoulders made it look human. All this was freaky, but we both stared intensely, as to figure out what it was. When we got closer, the face became more and more defined. The first second we laid eyes on it, the face and head did not make sense. But I put my mind at ease, saying to myself, well, it looks strange now, but when you get face to face you will see a familiar goat snout, or cat/canine nose, or jackrabbit face. No. This thing looked like it came out of a horror movie, like a space alien creature or humanoid monster. The nose I was looking for was not there, just a flat opening with 2 nose holes high up on the face. No ears. Just small holes on the side of its head, but whatever they were smaller than a human's for sure. It had high brow ridge bones, but the skull did not have a huge human cranium, more like the size of a chimp's. It had a large chin that protruded, maybe strong jawbones. But this part one totally don't get at all. The eyes. I saw these large eye sockets off in the distance, but they never reflected in the light. As it came nearer and nearer I saw the color red, not like a light that was glowing but maybe many veins. The blood within was giving it the darkest color on this pale beast. As we were within 10 to 15 yards away I only saw sockets and no eyeball, like that of a blind cave fish. Now this blew me away. I thought, how is this thing turning its head to glare at me with no eyes? Was it a ghost? But as it passed us and I came to a complete stop I saw it zip into the chaparral and kick up dust. This thing had been flesh and blood at least for the 15 to 20 seconds that we observed it. I might add there was no smell or anything else odd that we noticed. I should have taken pictures of the tracks but did not think to do it because I was very puzzled and thought maybe we had witnessed a ghost because of how unreal it appeared. I was also with my family, which I am very protective of. Normally if I had been alone I would be on the trail. What this thing was doing so close to a campground puzzles me. My wife said, even though I was only thinking about it, this thing seemed intelligent and was creeping in the dark, mad at us for discovering it. The mouth was closed but it had tight closed lips that almost seemed to grin. I did not see any teeth, large canine or flat herbivores. Its skull was that of a predator, not prey, with eye sockets positioned on the front, not the sides. I have seen a great many extraordinary things in my life, so I have learned to be a great eyewitness and not jump to conclusions, only observe, make notes and evaluate later. My wife is the biggest skeptic I have ever met, not fully believing the many extraordinary stories I have told. She comes from a lifetime of cold, hard, harsh reality, no room for any stretch of the imagination. Well, now she is a believer and is afraid to this day of what is walking around those Sierra Nevada mountains.
This past July, while camping in the Sierra Nevada mountains, near Tioga Lake, California, my teenage son and I were camping in our RV. There were other campers in the area, but not very close to us. On the 3rd night of our trip, we encountered something that neither of us can explain. This is bear country, and I know that there have been Bigfoot reports over the years. But what we saw was neither as far as we can tell. We secured all of the food and other supplies in the RV and were getting ready to go to bed. It was about 12:30 a.m. My son fell asleep quickly while I was getting a few things ready as we were going to leave this location later in the morning. I was looking at a map when I started to hear high-pitched screams. At first I thought it was a coyote, but it was a single scream and sounded more human, like a woman's scream. I opened the RV door and stood silent in the doorway. Once again the high-pitched scream started. This time, it woke my son. We both stood at the door as the screams continued from the direction of the mountain. After about 10 minutes the screams stopped. We both went to bed. Something startled me while I was sleeping because I woke up in a panic. I looked at my watch, it was 2:40 a.m. Then all of a sudden that same high-pitched scream erupted outside of the RV. As it started, my son jumped out of his rack and fell to the floor. I grabbed my .44 just in case. As we looked out through the windshield, the moonlight was bright enough to illuminate a tall, thin creature with light-colored skin. My son yelled zombie. It did look like a female human form, but the face and the rest of the body looked horrible. It reminded me of an old witch, no clothes, deformed face, long light-colored hair, long arms and legs. I figured it stood almost 7 feet. It was walking away from the RV toward the lake. I had seen enough. I made sure everything was ready to go and drove out of there ASAP. We ended up near Mono Lake. A few days later I was able to talk to a ranger as he walked through the camping area. He was an older guy and quite engaging. I described what we witnessed. My son also verified what we had seen. The ranger got a serious look on his face and said that over the years, something similar had been reported a few times. He said that they called it Penelope, but he didn't know why it had gotten that name. That's all he knew.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check out the Odyssey page in the description for a second archive of the channel's videos.